Hermes draw near, and to my prayer incline, in arts gymnastic and in fraud divine.
Dire weapon of the tongue which men revere, be present, Hermes, in thy suppliant here.
Welcome to Third Eye Bind, Episode 1, Death.
Thank you for supporting the show by subscribing, rating, and sharing. Please join us at patreon.com/thirdeyebind.
Hi, and welcome to Third Eye Bind. I'm Laura Wong.
And I'm Kaitlyn Grania.
Let's get into it, shall we?
We shall.
Talking about today?
This week we are talking about death. And to kick us off, let's shuffle the deck and see what the cards have to say, how they'd like to guide us. Ooh, that's it. Should I cut it? Yes. Okay, so we have the King of Wands. Ooh, reversed. Okay, we are doing reversals. The Queen of Wands reversed.
What?
And the Knight of Wands reversed.
What?
I feel like I need to shuffle these again.
Were they shuffled?
I mean, I was sitting here shuffling them for a while.
No, you were.
So
you know what?
These are the ones. These are the ones.
I do that too, where I'm like, oh, I pulled this card and I think I don't like it. So there's not enough variety. So I'm going to put it back.
All right. So
wow. Okay.
What I'm receiving from these three cards together is the call to see death. To see death not as a destination, but as a source. But as a source of wisdom and inspiration. There is a very Western fear of death and all that it entails. There is a rejection that we witness in our desire to stay young without realizing youth is eternal and internal, and in embracing death we release our fear of that final breath. Instead welcome it as an opportunity to start again. How beautiful is death in the way she welcomes us all with arms open, heart warm into the next chapter. The unknown. You never need to travel alone. And I feel them pointing towards Mercury. Mm-hmm. And Mercury, Hermes, our patron spirit, our muse, is a psychopomp. And psychopomps are spirits who assist the living in transitioning from our corporal vessels to the other side. I think a huge fear around death is the solitude. Yeah. And feeling like you might be lost once you exit this body and enter the unfamiliar. And you might be, but you're certainly not alone. You're certainly not without guides who desire to make the transition for you as inspirational, helpful, healing as it needs to be.
I'm getting like normal. When it's not normal in the way that humans understand normality.
The way waking up in the morning.
The comfort of that.
Yes.
Yeah, because we don't know. Yeah. The comfort of the unknown.
Yeah.
How do we find comfort in that? Because what is the norm of death? The death is, you're afraid of death. You dread death. Death is ugly, death is final, death is black in color and in shape and in like a black hole of just nothingness. But I'm interested in how death removes fear, not just the experience of yourself dying. I mean, we don't know exactly what happens until it happens. I'm interested particularly in how experiencing the death of others and loved ones removes fear from your life. Right?
Yeah.
Because I lost my dog, whom in my heart and mind I considered my child. I mean, the other one's on my lap. And what I've found within myself since her passing is that I'm like into really morbid shit. Unafraid. I'm unafraid of ghosts or shadow or like I'm unafraid of that sort of stuff. Whereas before, like, not that I was afraid of the dark or whatever, but I think there's a natural tendency to, as a human, to fear that. But my direct encounter with her dying in front of me, and I don't know if that's me and that's a part of grieving, right? Like, I don't know if in my grief state that I'm manufacturing that fearlessness as a mask for my pain, or if it's real. Sometimes I'm like, am I just being super morbid because I'm sad or because I'm unafraid? Okay. That's interesting.
And does the difference between the two matter?
Yeah. And why does that? Yeah. And does it matter? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a strategy that I've come up with to cope. Or maybe that is the lesson that that I've been able to take from it.
Yeah.
I don't know, what in your experiences with death, like, how has that affected you spiritually?
Death, I mean, I grew up in a tradition where fearing death wasn't really a part of the equation.
Right.
And I always felt very blessed for having that reference around death. But it doesn't make it less difficult when you experience it in the moment. I didn't realize you watched your baby.
Yeah, she passed
Yeah.
in a pretty beautiful way. And, we had the vet come to the house, and it was right outside that door. But just being present for it, which was very peaceful, but at the same time, like, devastating and interesting. But yeah.
When my dad passed away, my mom called me. It was a Thursday morning and said, "Dad's not going to wake up today. He's still breathing. He's waiting for you." And so I grabbed my kids, and my partner was at work. He ended up coming later. But I grabbed the kids. We called out of school. I called out of work, and we went straight to my mom's house. And we sat with him until he was ready to take his last breath. And I think there's something really, despite how much like heartbreak you feel, I feel like there's something really intimate and special about seeing somebody who's so important to you, like watching them take their last breath. I am so grateful. I am so grateful that I got to witness his transition. And I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. My baby was combing his hair for the last time. And then he took his last few breaths, and we were all there with him. And I hope that, I think that with hospitals and hospice care and all these different things, like our Western world has made us so far removed from death, kind of in the same way we're removed from our food. You know, it's all like
birth,
prepackaged
too.
and birth. Let's do an episode about that.
Episode about birth coming. It's a good topic.
It is a good topic. It's very spring.
Yeah. Very spring.
And I think that those situations are ones we avoid, but I'm so grateful that we were present for it. I'm so glad I got to see his last breath. I would not have wanted it any other way. And I think that by embracing what was happening rather than hiding from it, we had the opportunity to experience this really beautiful moment that I don't know that everybody gets to experience.
No.
And you know, it's not always an option, but if it is an option, like, and there's something about being present when death is present. Like I'm a medium. I work with death. I talk to spirits all the time, but there was something really powerful about witnessing the transition into the afterlife, actually being there during the portal. And I would imagine it's kind of like what it feels like to witness somebody giving birth, to be there for like this moment that comes for us all, the spirit who comes for us all. Felt like an initiation of sorts, a rite of passage.
It feels heightened. Like when there's a heightened sense of reality where it's just nothing. It was really interesting because she was old. She had lung cancer. And she was ready. And that dog was just such a beautiful spirit and connected and had probably been here a few go-rounds. And to see the way that she told me she was ready was beautiful and made me feel like that was the right decision. Yes, of course, I have guilt and I go back and I'm like, what? But the day before and the few days before she died, she would just stare off into the sky. She was seeing shit. She was seeing things that she didn't look. She was just like, I'm fucking ready. And she just would look at nothing, at seemingly nothing. And that was and it gave me this same kind of feeling that I get when I do magic, when I'm in a heightened sense, a state of being, meditative states. It was so interesting. So when her death came, it was, I mean, she was, you know, she wasn't super comfy. So it was a relief to just like relieve her of that burden. But yeah, it was a very heightened, like there's something about it it's not like, oh, now go to the grocery store. It's like, and it's not just my own emotional state that's heightened. It's like the environment becomes, yeah. And I'm sure you feel that probably every day since you're a medium. I am not a medium, for the record. I'm clairaudient. If you're all, is you are, bitch? I mean, I don't
say so, Laura.
I know. I don't consider myself a medium in business practice or in profession.
You're certainly not a professional medium.
I'm not a professional medium.
But right before we started filming, Laura was channeling, lighting candles. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do channel things. I do absolutely channel messages and auditory. But in terms of speaking to the dead in a direct way, I have never practiced that or been super interested in that for myself. It's not like, I don't think it's my calling.
Yes.
But words and this podcast are my calling. So, yeah. but you know, I mean, I would imagine as a medium, here, you're getting those different sorts of messages all the time.
It's interesting, like the intense energy of the space, like I feel like death, it literally is a crossing over, and I feel as though our space around the dying becomes this portal in order for them to transition into the afterlife. So it makes sense that like you physically feel the shift of the energy in the room. And when we think about the spiritual tradition that I'm in, black is the color of everything.
Okay.
All of creation. And if I'm thinking about it from that perspective, like death is black, like it's the allness. And no wonder it feels so intense, because it is every spirit, like every memory, every lifetime. I bet like your pup was looking off and seeing spirits they had connected with in previous lives.
Yeah.
Ancestors.
Guiding, beckoning.
Yes.
Yes. It was
and
really...
your whole space opened up to those spirits coming through to like call them
She
home.
was very special. She would sit outside at night and just want to be outside and just like bask in the moonlight, sort of a vibe. She was very special.
And what you said about like you can't just go to the store afterwards. Like it kind of sucks, because in this world eventually we have to, right? We have to go to the store.
I wanted to crawl into a hole
Forever. Yes, forever.
Forevs.
Yeah.
Forevs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this made me think of two things. The first is like there's so much grace in grieving in public.
Ugh.
And it feels super scary at first, but then all of a sudden you're standing in the frozen food aisle sobbing and somebody just knows.
Yeah.
And you get to have this like sad but really intimate moment of like sharing that you understand what grief is. And I don't know, like I just feel like that's such an important part of our human experience.
That's brave to be vulnerable enough to let yourself have those feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to not shame yourself for having grief. I'm still grieving her a year later.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this before we started recording, but like grief is forever with us. It's not something that goes away. And that's not just, what we're saying. That's like psychology. Like that's my therapist told me that 2 days ago. Like it's like, how do we live with that? And and that's where I'm interested in extracting the lessons of death and fucking barreling into that, because that is the only way I can see myself surviving it. And you know what? I don't give a shit. Some people think I'm dumb because it was just my dog or whatever, but those people can fuck off. Because I believe love is relative, and I'm not a person that wants to have human children. And I think that's okay. And so, she was my child. And to even allow myself to admit that, and my therapist to very kindly hold that up and say, you lost a child in your heart. You did. And just to have someone say that was very validating, and then allowed me to like not shy away from the grief, which is like the worst thing you can do, I think, right? So if anyone's ever lost a pet and you felt like garbage, you're not alone, and your love matters and your love is valid. So yeah.
This reminds me of the Lover's card, because the Lover's card is one of the first. I think the Hierophant's the first with multiple characters. So it's the second card with multiple characters in the major arcana. And we have two human beings, and we have an angel over the top. And depending on what source you're reading, it's theorized that the angel is Raphael, who is the angel of healing. And from my perspective, we get this message of healing sometimes, not always, but there are certain points in your healing that require being witnessed by another human being. There are parts of our healing that must be seen by others. And maybe that's part of our duty as stewards of the earth.
As
human beings.
That's just...
to like hold space for one another in our pain.
Social animals.
So that we can open up to the spirits of healing. This also makes me think of the death card, and the true message behind the death card is...
Which we did not pull.
And we knew we weren't going to pull it.
We weren't going to pull
because we're both psychic.
Because I'm a psych. That sounds so weird to say. But
When it's true, it's true.
When it's true, it's true.
But like the death card is a card of transformation, yes, but accepting the transformation. The tower comes through and it's like you don't really have a choice.
Right.
The change is being made for you. But death is an invitation. Death knocks and you have to answer and receive the call. And in the situation of loss of a loved one, somebody who's really close to you, a child, a parent, a lover, I do think we're it's almost like a minute by minute choice to crawl into a hole, to cry, to occupy ourselves, to escape, and also like to numb. And sometimes I was thinking recently about how my life has changed since my dad passed, and I had this thought of, I don't think I could have made these changes if he had stayed alive. I don't think I would have been motivated enough or had the necessity to do these things that have brought me to a place that I like being if he were still here.
I understand that.
Oof.
I understand that. Because what we were saying before, if death can remove fear, then anything is possible. If you embrace that. I'm a more confident, fearless person because I saw her die. Am I some other things? Yeah. I'm working through them. But am I kind of depressed? Yeah. But we're dealing with that, But that's the fact that I'm able to talk about it, like you said, and share through this episode or through talking with you or my husband or whoever, or my therapist, because I'm a mercurial being, and I'm a Gemini, and that is we are both Geminis.
Shout out Geminis.
Gemini season. It's Gemini season. Okay. I had to say it once that I was a Gemini. As a Gemini,
we'll probably say it a few times.
I have to mention that I'm a Gemini at least one time per podcast.
Per episode, yeah.
Probably. So, are you a witch? Do you like cool things for witches, made by witches? You're going to want to check out Lady Moon Co. We have pins, apparel, accessories, a lot of things dedicated to our favorite movie, Practical Magic, and even some innovative tools like our traveling spell space, a spell space you can take with you. I digress. Lady Moon Co. has some magic for everybody. We are proud to be a witch-owned business, making you feel seen and represented in or out of the broom closet. Use code BIND for 20% off your order. That's BIND, B-I-N-D.
Spirit Garden is for the spiritual seekers, the spellcasters, the conjurers, the tarot lovers, occult enthusiasts, and the magically and mystically inclined. My benevolent spirits and I are here to support you on your spiritual journey through spiritual consultations, mentorships, workshops and classes, and guided trance journeys. You can also join our monthly membership, Moonshadows, for access to over 50 blog posts, on-demand classes, a living, growing grimoire, original tarot spreads, and access to our private Discord community. At the Spirit Garden, all pantheons are welcome. use code Third Eye for 15% off of your next spiritual consultation.
Death comes for all of us, so why be afraid of it? And I have less of a fear of it myself. And some may call that morbid, but what is morbidity? What is being morbid? What if it's, you know, like, what if it's not such a bad thing sometimes?
I think in a culture that rejects aging, the word morbid comes to exist.
Yeah.
And really, I think we're becoming more harmonized with existence and the cycles of existence. Like, is it morbid, or is it actually very much in alignment with being a member of planet Earth, where
Right.
things grow and seed and bloom and die and start all over again eternally?
Yeah, like that's a lesson. And this Western cultures do shy away from death. And I was brought up in an agnostic household, and you know, I was a little witch doing my own little witch things on my own, and self-taught and observed, but I was never a part of a organized religion or anything like that, which is neither here nor there, just how it was for me. But I find that really kind of cool that you were in a situation where you were taught to sort of embrace it in a different way than what's normally accustomed. I think that's beneficial.
It is. And it's definitely something that I've been trying to share with my children too, to normalize that type of, I mean, I grew up with a double life, Catholic during the day, and then we were espiritistas at home. And for folks who don't know, espiritismo is a system of spiritual practices that was birthed in the Caribbean. And the particular practice that I am a part of comes from Cuba. What was I talking about? Oh, but Catholicism, Catholicism, the icon, the like mascot is dead Jesus.
Dead Jesus!
With Catholicism, so if we're going morbid.
I love Catholicism.
Like Catholicism and bones of saints.
And blood of Christ and body of
cannibalism.
Christ. We're going to eat Christ.
Transfiguration, turning bread into a body that we're all going to eat together.
Yes,
the
please.
side wound of Jesus. So like death everywhere all the time. And like also I feel like part of Catholic culture is like your grandmother calling and saying who died this week. Like, that's part of it too.
I want to be Catholic.
It's pretty,
not too late.
Like folk Catholicism is pretty fun. It's never too late.
That's a whole other episode.
We will.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty dope.
But like, you know, in Catholicism, it is kind of glorified death and almost
the sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's an episode too.
I know. Shit. We're on a roll.
We're just full of good ideas. But in espiritismo, it's less about loss and more about a celebration of the person's transition into the realm of the ancestors.
Yeah, which exists for you because
and
you were taught that, and it's your just truth. I had to like piece that little baby together on my own, and so I question those things more. I constantly question my like, do I believe in growing up? Yes, I believe in those things now, because more than if someone says, how do you believe in that stuff? It's like, I would rather live a life with magic and mystery than a fucking boring ass nothing.
Yes.
That's baseline my reason. I am constantly like amazed when those things are shown to me.
Yeah.
And I love that. I kind of love that discovery. But anyway, that I have a strong foundation in my beliefs and my witchcraft, because I had to confidently own that for myself. I didn't have anyone else telling. And that's not to say that if you were taught that that is any less. I absolutely do not think that. I think it's really, really amazing when it's generational and when it's cultural. It just wasn't for me. But that's something that I think has been kind of... So when I really believe something, it's like, okay, it comes from my self-confidence and my understanding of the intuitive world and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, death was not one of those things that was like talked about. I mean, for instance, my mom, I remember my hamster died when I was in 3rd grade while I was at school. And she had it buried and had a cute little cross with its name on it by the time I got home. She took care of it for me. She burdened that for me. It was hidden from the pain of death was sort of hidden from me to protect me, which is a wonderful gesture. But in the long run, it sort of did not prime me for seeing my dead hamster and saying, it was named Joey because like a little baby kangaroo. Joey's dead. Here's his body. Like, I don't know. There's something to be said about kids that are able to, see that and to maybe they get a little weird. My niece's hamster died. In comparison, my niece's hamster died, and this little girl fucking FaceTimed me with it in her hand and went, "It died." Look at it.
Taxidermy.
And I was like, Gianna, what the fuck? I told her mom, she's like, yeah, I was like, that's really cool that maybe she thought it was funny, but at least she was like, she was able to witness that.
Yeah. And process her grief.
Yeah. And so even if it's in a weird childlike way, like that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is funny. It's reminding me of recently my neighbor knocked on my door and was like, I just wanted to let you know that there's like a dead cat behind your house. And I just think it might be traumatic for the kids to see. And I don't want them to like stumble upon that. And I was like, thank you. And I went inside and I realized like, my kids would I'd have to tell them that they can't keep it. Like, we can't taxidermy it. You can't have the bones.
We can't boil it.
We can't boil. We can say, we can do a little ceremony for their passing, but you can't have it. But I've tried to make death really normal around my children. Like, we are constantly observing nature. And whether it's our plants are falling out of season and withering and going through their cycle, or it's watching the birds. We literally saw a hawk scoop up a squirrel and eat it.
Oh shit, that's rad.
I know, right? It was very like
rad.
National Geographic to IRL. It was cool, but it's also just a part of life. Things die.
Yeah.
People die. Plants die. And I want them to feel, you're never prepared for when it happens to you in an intimate way, but I don't want them to feel lost, I guess. You know? I think that when we don't talk about grief at all, and we don't talk about dying at all, that's when it really hits us hard because we've never had the tools to figure out how to move through our grief, how to exist in communion with our grief.
What I'm getting right now is I'm getting, and that's what dark work, that's what shadow work is, or that's why people shy away from that. And that's a whole nother topic also. Yeah. But it's like, that's a part of that work is facing those things.
Yes.
Yes. What do you say? I accept the message.
I accept. I receive. I receive.
And that's a part of it, is what I'm hearing. And it's like, yeah, it is. It's an ugly truth. And then it's like, okay, people die. They're no longer here. But they're somewhere. There's there's too many experiences that I've had, that the humanity has had, for me to believe that there's nothing. There's no way. And I'm okay admitting that.
Yeah.
I'm all a witch and I'm like, I believe in the afterlife. What an amazing concept. Like but that's the world. That's it's a skeptic world, and that's what I was brought up with. And so for me to even have those thoughts, and that's just vulnerability, and that's a whole nother topic. And I'm getting a little off topic, but just being able to express, that's like step one, I think, is being able to express your thoughts on death or your thoughts on the afterlife, and in a way where you can be accepted. It can be accepted, and maybe it's not just pulled apart immediately by the norm. It's hard to do that for me. And I'm sure for a lot of other people, when you're taught that you're too emotional, you're too weird, or that's not, it's like, what is weird? Maybe it's weird not to think that. Or maybe you can think whatever you want. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about being able to express what you believe is true or what you experience.
Being honest with yourself.
I think that's the first step in even thinking about death as something other than what it's perceived to be, Yeah.
Which is what, like an ending?
An ending, a finale, a final stage, a negative thing.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we it's very hard, and it's not like ever going to be totally possible, but for someone that's grieving, like, how do you reframe death to extract some sort of positivity or some sort of lesson,
I think that sometimes we don't need to find lessons in our suffering.
Right.
I think that suffering is sometimes a part of life. And like, okay, when we think about Mercury and binaries, one thing cannot exist without the other. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a liminal space where they intersect or expand or don't apply at all. But without suffering, can we truly understand and witness joy? And even if we lived in like a perfect world, a communal world, an equitable world where there's no money and no jobs, like we're all just fulfilling our purposes and caring for one another and caring for the planet, people will still die. Our animals will still die. Sometimes our plants are going to die. And even in that perfect world, we would have to move through the suffering of grief. I don't know that there's always a lesson to it, but we are changed forever by it.
Right.
And embracing our new self, our reborn self. We're reborn at someone's death. Like, how magical is that we are rebirthed through someone else's death.
That is alchemy.
That is alchemy in action.
That is alchemy in action. That's how I feel. And and searching for a lesson is a very human thing.
Totally. We need to find reasons.
We need to find reasons why, so that we can file them away and be all right. But the very act of suffering, the perspective that it brings is not. It requires no effort. You're right. It's just expression. A different experience and an expression, and that's nice when people say to you, you can feel however you want to feel, and it goes up and down and around, and it lasts forever. I think what I'm trying to find myself, or to reiterate, or to imbue in myself for the long term, is how can I find a reason, but like, how can I keep it from being harmful to, I don't know how to explain it, like harmful to my way of life, because we are human. I basically just want to be like a fairy and like fuck everything. Like, that's it. Like, fuck everything. but also literally maybe fuck everything. I don't know. Fairies,
That's very
fairy
fae.
orgies. I don't know. But like, grief makes me feel like being human is a burden. In general, that's how I feel. But in the irony, I think in that is in seeking to be ethereal, which I don't know is like possible for me, like as a human, like there's got to be but for embracing the ethereal, I think is suffering, like is embracing the suffering. Does that make sense? It's kind of a weird way to say it, but it's like not fighting it.
Mm-hmm. The surrender.
Surrendering to it. But then there's also a balance of like, how does this not become completely detrimental to my mental health?
Absolutely.
And that's the rub, I think, for me at least. And people thinking about death. It's like, how do I live with this? And I think a part of it as a human is finding its purpose. But not analyzing it to death.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Like finding a channel to express it through.
Yeah.
Whether it's crying or creating or screaming or taking really long baths, anchoring into your spiritual practices, anchoring into, nourishing yourself. And sometimes these things are hard to do, especially when we're grieving. But when we're able to do them just a little bit here, a little bit there, it helps us bring us back to our center. And yes, like find purpose in our suffering, find purpose in our sorrows.
An output.
Yeah. When you think about like all of the art that comes
all
from
the music,
grief and loss. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's as natural as, puberty and
I mean, art is
love.
pain, right? Art comes from pain.
It can. It also comes from pleasure.
It does.
And
isn't that interesting?
It's delicious. And these are things that are, at least from what I've been channeling from the spirits lately, like pain and pleasure are like part of humanity, part of being of the flesh. And it is something that, quite frankly, the spirits say they envy about us because they're so far removed from their vessels. Like, yes, they might not experience pain the same way we do, but they also don't experience pleasure the same way we do. Like, that is one of the gifts of being born on the garden planet is pleasure.
So in a way, death is a privilege of humanity. If you think about it like that, the life cycle is holy.
It is.
The life cycle that we experience and the cycles of the earth that we witness are holy, and death is a part of that. And that's, I think, more of what we should be taught, because there are plenty of cultures that do.
But not here in America.
Not Western cultures. And that's a disservice. It is a disservice to kids and adults and people and just living, because it's such a dreaded thing. And this brings it full circle. I've found I'm fearless because I've experienced death. And again, I will say it again. Yeah. So I've gone back around. It's like, it's really interesting to me how much that I'm not afraid to die. But not in a creepy way. Like I would like to live, but I'm also accepting of that.
I feel like not being afraid to die makes us more open to really living, like taking risks on ourselves, taking risks on what brings us pleasure, what brings us excitement, inspiration, passion. So a healthy, lack of fear about death, I think is essential to being brave enough to live. And of course, there's always like extremes, right? There's always extremes, and we're forever trying to find the balance so that nothing takes over our mind and our experience too much. But, you know, the ball's always moving. It's not like one target that we're trying to hit. It's who are we right now and what supports us right now in this moment, and being open for when that has to change again. And again and again.
And that leaves you open to changes that you, like positive changes too, that you may not be willing to accept or to, it gives you perspective. And it gives me confidence, because if I'm dealing with some bullshit with my business that I'm not as sensitive to it, because I'm like, well, I went through that. I lost, you know, like her loss is, it's a kind of a morbid way to think about it, but it's like, I don't really give a shit because I lost my baby, so I can handle this. And it's a little bit of a guarded thought, but that's just me, you know, but that works for me.
But, well, and I don't think it's that dissimilar from the way I feel about like birthing a human. Like I did that, I can do anything. And I don't feel like there's a difference between those two. I mean, obviously they're physically different, right? But like,
It's
I think that energy is the same of like, I've already done the biggest thing I could do, and I'm still here. So I can literally do anything.
And it's something a lot of people do. Is everyone is birthed.
Yeah.
Somehow
we get here.
And some of us give birth. But everybody dies.
Everybody dies. There's no exceptions. No matter how badly you want to be cryogenically frozen.
I know.
It's just not.
So why? And that's cool.
It's cool.
If there's science is magic.
Totally.
And if you know, modern alchemy and magicians want to push those boundaries, that's pretty interesting too.
I know. But then what does that mean for the afterlife and like the realm of ancestors?
I don't know.
If we all just stop reincarnating, do we stop becoming better people?
Yeah, like what? Yeah, probably. Right? I don't know. It's a trip.
There's no reason to become a better human if you know you're never going to die.
I want to die.
Me too. I can't do this shit forever.
I want to die. I'm not one of those people that's like, I want to live forever. I definitely don't.
No. I know I don't want to die right now.
I don't want to die now.
I know that everybody will be okay if I do.
Maybe
I don't want to die now.
Give me like 80, 85. I'm good.
I'd like to have gray hair.
I'd like to experience more of this wonderful life that we get to have.
Me too.
Even though it's crazy. But, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made sense.
It does. You know, when I talk to the dead.
You're all I talk to.
When I talk to the dead.
I literally talk.
But what often comes up, well, so many different things come up, but something that does come up is, the afterlife. Right. So I want to be a good ancestor. I don't always want to be trapped within the limits of my physical flesh.
The meat sack.
Yeah.
Technical term.
There are limits to it. I want to be a good ancestor. But also, like, what if I still have a few more lifetimes ahead of me and they're fucking radical? Like...
Oh, yeah.
But everything exists all at once. So am I an ancestor and dead and alive all at the same time? I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe the auditory thoughts I get are from myself as an ancestor in another plane.
Right? Doesn't that blow your mind sometimes?
Yeah. How fun.
It blows my mind in the best way. Wow. And then it makes death not so scary. You know, like, what if I get to come back and be a fucking lapdog?
I want to be a dog so bad.
It would be the best. Cute collars.
I just want to be an animal.
Nice, fresh meals, water.
I don't want to have thoughts. I don't want money to be a thing for me. Right. I don't want any of that. I just want eat, sleep, fuck, reproduce.
Like, nap.
Maybe live 2 years and then get hit by a car or something. Like a squirrel, not a dog, like a squirrel, or a snake, or like, I don't know, just something.
Yes.
Something just
bee.
simple. A simple kind of life.
Love to be a bee.
I want to be a squirrel.
They're so floofy.
They're so floofy. What's our next segment?
Spirit candy.
Now it's time for Spirit Candy, our segment where we share messages from our spirits. We are both channelers of messages, so we thought it'd be fun to share some of those with our audience.
Little delicious morsels and bites of spirit for you.
Spirit candy. Go ahead.
Okay, so this particular message I channeled from the spirit Ashura, and what she had to say was, the earth has asked you to be here. She has called out to you by name, to arise from the ashes, to break from the heavens and share your lights, your gifts here on the garden planet. Chosen by your mother, the earth, born with her magic and your own. How beautiful, this love, this life. Do not disregard your gifts. The earth needs you, especially you, authentically as you are. We love you.
Aw, that's so nice. It's very sweet. Sweet like candy.
It reminds me of,
I want to eat some. I'll wait.
You mentioned that death, your acceptance of death, your relationship with death now has made you more fearless. And I kind of feel like that message is about being fearless enough to live as you are. So I like that.
That's a nice message for everyone to hear. Everyone needs to hear that.
It's really it really is
Truly.
for everyone.
And
If
do
you
you
were
find
born-
that the messages that you get tend to be for the masses, like for a lot of people? Because I do.
Yeah.
Like, it's always like, tell them this.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, you need to say this
Yeah.
out loud to people because you have the ability to do that.
To do it. Yes. That's part of being born a child of Mercury. Like, it's literally our job, what we were designed to do.
Well,
And we were all designed to do different things.
and we were all designed to do different things. Well, thank you, Spirit. I forgot the name of your
thank
spirit.
you. Ashura, thank you.
Do you get the name of your spirits?
I always ask.
I don't ask. They're all just a big blank. I'm working on
Yeah.
it, but I never get like names. They just go, okay, bye.
We all channel differently.
They go, hey, blah, and get pizza. That's kind of the vibe. Okay, so mine a lot of the time have to do with, they're frustrated also with social media and the way that people are arguing and fighting. There's a lot of negative space in the witch community online and within each other, within the way that people, I don't want to say with the way that people are teaching, because I'm grateful that there are teachers, but when they're not they're doing it with a selfish air and a selfish.
It's a slippery slope between
slope.
like teacher and cult leader.
Yes.
Like,
And self-indulgence.
Yes,
I don't like that.
ego.
I don't. I'm not into that when they're leading with ego. But, okay, this kind of relates to what... There's a message that says, it's more than manifesting. It is honoring and connecting something outside yourself. Being grateful for the world. In reference to practicing. It's more than just taking. It's about connecting and honoring to what's around you and being grateful for it rather than just manifesting. I'm going to manifest this for myself. It's like, okay, but are you connected? Like, are you actually connected to the source what is your relationship to the source that will aid you in manifesting these things?
it doesn't come from nowhere.
It doesn't come from nowhere, and what you put out matters deeply to what you get. I believe. So I believe that's what that was about. It was kind of a short one. I'll do one more because mine are kind of short.
I love that because, like, ultimately, isn't that what witchcraft is?
Yeah.
You know, like honoring the planet, honoring the cosmos, and like choosing to intentionally be a part of it, a part of the rhythm and the cycles. Like that's that's magical.
I think that gets lost and distorted a lot.
Because we're all focused on like aesthetic.
Oh, pause for this next message. Fostering a connection that's more than aesthetically based. They scream that in my ear constantly. And that just means honoring and cultivating a connection that isn't aesthetically based, that it's not just showing pictures of your altar, which is fine if that's what you want to do. It's just because you post photos of and wear black and do all the things you think a witch is supposed to do doesn't mean that I won't say it doesn't mean that you aren't a witch, because I don't judge people I don't judge. If you want to be that, then you're that. But I would challenge a person to really, for their own benefit, look at it and say, am I actually connected again, or is it just my Instagram feed?
Because like being a witch is actively choosing counterculture. It is actively choosing to be a part of the liminal spaces, to be ostracized by society. So if you're doing it to fit in, that doesn't make sense to what witchcraft is about.
No.
You're not supposed to do it to fit in. You do it to accept yourself.
That's the problem that I'm seeing. More on that in another episode. Delicious candy.
A little bit sour, a little bit sweet.
Delicious candy.
Our favorite kind. Taking candy from witches is my favorite thing to do.
Trick or treat, witches.
Trick or treat.
Thank you for tuning into the very first episode of Third Eye Bind.
Yes, be sure to give us a call on the Third Eye line. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow the podcast at Third Eye Bind Pod on Instagram. There, submit your questions via the Third Eye line by sending us a voice message or text DM. The show is available wherever you listen to podcasts and for you to watch on YouTube. Get early access to episodes and even monthly one-on-one sessions with us by joining our Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/thirdeyebind. Third Eye Bind is produced and edited by Mike Realm. Hosted by Kaitlyn Grania and Laura Wong. Music by Mike Realm. Set design by Laura Wong. You can find Laura on Instagram at Lady Moon Co. And you can find Kaitlyn on Instagram at Spirit Garden Tarot.